Hey everybody, Samuel Calkins
Hello.
and myself, Captain Foley, welcoming you back to the first full Trekyards episode for 2015. We're in week 3, so you've already seen a few things, but we'd like to welcome you to 2015 officially, so welcome aboard. Today I'm really excited. As you can see, I'm wearing my captain's uniform. Got the bars to prove it.
Ooh, very TOS.
You got anything over there to show me? No? Oh, I see.
Captain Foley, are you there? Yes,
No.
you're on Skype. Of course you're there, but yeah. We're in TOS mood today, aren't we? Ooh, hints. We already told them. Okay, fine, yeah. TOS.
Yeah. And today I'm excited because we're spotlighting a fan favorite, one you guys have asked for, and one of my personal favorites.
I like it too.
Well, there you go. Which, if you can't tell, is TOS era, obviously. It's the Federation class Dreadnought. And we're going to be looking at both the TOS versions as well as the movie era versions. And as always, we talk about non-canon as well. Plus, we're also going to speak about a few variants. So let's get underway.
So these ships were designed by Starfleet. These are one of the largest ships in the fleet, and they're authorized for construction on stardate 6066 and served until the mid to late 22nd century. And to give you some temporal context, because we do the research for you guys, the second pilot, where no man has gone before, took place on stardate 1312. And the last episode of TOS took place in stardate 5930, with the first movie, taking place on 7410. So, the Dreadnoughts were commissioned snugly in between the third year of the 5-year mission and the movie. So we think about the 4th year. Around then, the Dreadnoughts came out and blew the opposition away, we assume. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, this is obviously a Dreadnought class Dreadnought size ship, sorry. The Federation class, which is rather a fitting name, I think. Its length was 320 meters, width of 140 meters, and a height of 87 meters. So it's not as big as we first anticipated when we went into this episode. It's just a little bit bigger than the actual Constitution class. So
I mean, I think when you watch the JJ Enterprise Into Darkness, you think a Dreadnought ship is so much larger. Moving on. But this Dreadnought, as you can see on the screen, is roughly the same size. It's just a bit bigger. So some more technical information. It's got a mass of 585,000 metric tons. The ship has 26 decks and a crew complement of 55 officers and 445 enlisted men. Compared to the Connie, 21 decks and 430 crewmen. So it's 5 more decks and slightly fewer crew. Cool.
Yeah. Weapons consisted of 5 dual emitter phaser banks equaling 10 phasers and 2 photon torpedo launchers.
Has a maximum warp speed of warp 10, old scale anyway, which would be about warp 8 in the TNG scale, and a cruising speed of warp 8, which is 6.5 TNG. So it's definitely one of the fastest TOS ships.
Its defenses consisted of deflector shields and, interestingly enough, a holographic decoy projector.
Really?
Which sounds really neat, and I really would have loved to see one actually work. That would be very cool.
Yeah, I didn't know they had that much holographic know-it-all in the day.
See, I'm wondering if that actually projects a sensor image or if it's just a visual image, because to have a sensor image of a ship that big would be tricky to obtain, I would think.
Maybe that's the need for the 3 deflectors, but that's later on.
That's later on, yeah, that's a good point.
So these were the first ever Dreadnought starships in Federation history. They were nicknamed the Space Battleship. Probably quite fitting. And according to the Starfleet Technical Manual, 20 of these ships were planned and then constructed.
The Federation class were a type called Class 1, MKX, and consisted of a forward-facing shuttle bay, a 4-dish sensor, navigational deflector, and tractor beam arrangement, including a single aft sensor dish.
And an interesting thing about the ship is it's technically a variant ship. It was actually built out of other components, which most notably was a third nacelle. So sort of a kit bash, but in the actual canon, which is kind of cool.
Largest and most powerful Federation ship until the advent of the refitted Enterprise subclass and Constitution class refits in 2272.
That's cool.
So it's interesting that the refits are actually more powerful than the TOS Dreadnoughts.
It was definitely a serious bump up in tech, wasn't it then?
Yeah, I think so.
And most Starfleet task forces were actually commanded by an admiral in a Dreadnought as, I guess, a flagship. And most starbases were actually meant to have a Dreadnought on standby as well, which is really cool.
The Federation class was slightly inferior to Dreadnoughts of other major powers at the time. That's because I think the original concept was to include more capabilities, but only a minimal increase in firepower over the Constitution class. I think that's politics at their finest, guys, especially from the Federation. I mean,
Bureaucrats.
yeah, we're scientific and, we don't want to be at war. So, found to be inadequate to other powers whose dreadnought supported at least a 50% increase in power over their respective heavy cruisers. So they really needed to beef up this dreadnought weapons-wise, I think, to stand toe-to-toe.
Especially with the Klingons. Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Federation and Starfleet is not about war, so it shouldn't have to focus on weapons, but I mean, other guys do. Unfortunately, end up being that dreadnoughts were so expensive, not in money, but in time and manpower, to actually man and keep operational, actually stayed at starbases and weren't out on active duty until they were really needed, just because they were such a hog on resources.
One reason this design proved inefficient was because of the 3 warp nacelle configuration, which was actually found to be less workable than a vessel with an even number of warp engine units.
So in the hugely popular novel Dreadnought, written by Diane Carey, Vice Admiral Vaughan Rittenhouse authorised a greatly enhanced design of the ship named the USS Star Empire. Ego much? Which was an Excelsior version, I love the design of that. This vessel, however, caused a great deal of controversy and was decommissioned without being sent out on a single mission. What a shame. Would have been cool.
Oh, absolutely. So the TOS version of the Dreadnought was actually seen on screen in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. It was actually on a display screen in the Starfleet Academy training simulation at the beginning of the movie, kind of in the back.
Cool. That is cool. So did you actually see that when you watched it in the cinema? Were you not focusing on the death of our heroic characters and the monitors? Or was that just trivia that you saw after the fact?
It's trivia after the fact. I've even looked for it on screen. I can hardly see it. I've seen a few screen captures of it, but it's very, very undefined. So.
What's cool is this display was actually taken directly from Franz Joseph's Starfleet Technical Manual, directly on. And this is as the USS Federation prototype of its class, which is really cool.
By the 2280s, the Federation class was modified into a refit version with similar design changes as seen in the highly successful Constitution class refits. This included the refitted Federation class refit and a variant called the Ascension class. Each of these classes consisted of a different design elements, such as unique engine struts, which on the Ascension class are attached to the bottom of the secondary hull, and as such could be detached from the ship via explosive bolts should the need arise.
That is a strange looking ship.
I like it though. It's one of my favorites.
I do too. Bit strange though.
Whereas on the Federation class, the struts are horizontal and mounted on the top of the secondary hull as to not interfere with the shuttle bay. Other subtle changes included a very interesting bridge design, which consisted of 2 docking ports, one on each side aft of the main bridge module. A third and much larger, more powerful class was planned in non-canon sources named the Komsomolsk.
Cool.
Which is actually named after a city. Yeah, it's named after a city in the Ukraine, so I have a hard time pronouncing it. But it never went into production, probably due to the fact that nobody could pronounce it.
Yeah, cool. So let's go a bit further into non-canon, look at the nitty-gritty details. The refitted version could reach warp 15, which is warp 9.8 on the TNG scale. Didn't know that was possible in TOS time, and the cruising speed of warp 11, which is 8.5, really fast. And the Federation class this time consisted of 13 phaser banks, or 20 single phase emitters, and 4 photon torpedo tubes, and a crew of 70 officers and 430 listed men. The Ascension, a little smaller, 11 phaser banks, 18 single emitters, 2 photon torpedo launchers, and a crew of 65 officers and 42 enlisted. They definitely packed them out with more tech in the refits. Also stated, bit strange this one, apparently all the refits actually had cloaking devices. Not sure what to say about that one, but cool, yeah, okay, be useful. And the third plant, never produced, actually had 2 megaphasers, which we all know about from the Miranda, really powerful, and they would consist of 4 cannons, 10 banks of phasers, which would have been 18 single phaser emitters and 4 photon torpedo tubes. Oof. And because it's a bigger one, 60 officers and 525 enlisted men and women. It's a beast. And that's so much information I just threw at you.
Yeah, and I can see why that one didn't go in production. That was just huge. In regards to size of these refits, the refitted Federation class was actually smaller than the TOS version, measuring it at 307.6 meters long, 141.7 meters wide, and a height of 83.7 meters. The Ascension was smaller still at 289.8 meters long, 141.7 meters wide, the same width, and a height of 77.8 meters. Okay. However, the proposed Komsomolsk class that never went into production was going to be huge at a whopping 350 meters long, 185 meters wide, and 80 meters high. So that's pretty incredible.
Would have been cool to see on screen.
Yeah.
Imagine that going into Vija, and I remember a fleet of those. That'd be cool.
That would be cool.
Klingons wouldn't stand a chance in the Kittima stuff. Who needs a treaty when you've got dreadnoughts? Which never happened. But, and it's worth noting that Gene Roddenberry himself actually signed off on the TOS Federation class in 1973, since the schematics were seen in the film, which were officially signed off by him. And that's the only Star Trek movie he himself was in charge of making, which means canon. Official.
Star Trek the Motion Picture originally contained a line of voiceover dialogue referring to the Dreadnought, the USS Entente, NCC 2120. However, the director's cut of the film explicitly muddles this track, making it very difficult to hear. The technical manual... What's that?
Oh, no.
Oh.
Terrible.
The technical manual and its entries were a heavily used resource for the film, a perfect example of non-canon being made into canon. And in my opinion, they should have actually continued this into other movies as well, as there was a very solid non-canon base that existed, but they chose to ignore that. So, and we all know my feelings on that.
They should have done the whole Marvel thing, have a expanded universe of even more ships, just referencing them here and there would have been cool.
Yeah, exactly.
The Federation Dreadnought, because it was so popular, was actually included in the highly popular and successful Starfleet battles, because the company was allowed to use material from all the technical manuals, so they had a lot of extra stuff to go from, and that was a definite fan pick.
The ship, however, did conflict with Gene's own rules set down in the Star Trek guidelines, violating both his pairs rule as well as his nacelle line of sight rule. But there is nothing in universe canon that mandates these rules, so we don't know whether to accept them or not, because there are ships that break the rule.
Two good examples are the Niagara class, and of course, everyone loves it, the TNG Galaxy class X, I think it's called, from All Good Things.
There are also several ships that violate the line of sight rule as well, and there, as well as several single nacelle vessels, including the Freedom class, the Kelvin type, and the Saladin class, which are all very popular too among fans. So we might get into some of those later in Trekyards. But anyway, it's time for the discussion part of the show, so let's get to it.
Well, that's it for part 1 of the Federation class TOS Dreadnought. We found out more information than we expected, guys. This is now a 2-parter. Tune in next month for discussion and then verses. See you next time.